Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to Los Angelist. And thanks especially to my patrons on Patreon, Aziz, Bradley, Brian, Bridget, Ken, and Robert, for supporting Los Angelist and making this channel possible. So today I'm going to take a long-winded kind of circuitous look at a question that I think a lot of us have asked ourselves who live in the Los Angeles area, and that is, can or could we ever bring back the old Pacific Electric? And that is this wonderful interurban rail system that ran from Los Angeles to San Bernardino, Riverside, Orange County, Long Beach, San Pedro, and just really tied our region together, but was lost in the era of freeway construction for a number of complex reasons that I'm sure we'll get much deeper into in future videos on the channel. But what I want to do right now is let's go back a couple years. I set out to find out if there was an answer to the question, could we bring back the Pacific Electric Railway in its entirety, or at least an equivalent of this wonderful system? And I believe the answer is yes, is a resounding yes. And I wrote an op-ed and posted it on social media the other day, saying exactly that. And I think that there are murmurings that the next transit funding ballot initiative to defeat traffic, it's looking like it might be coming out in 2020, which makes a lot of sense because, yeah, like I said in my blog, voters were going to have other impeachier things on their mind in 2018. But I think getting this on the ballot in 2020 is realistic, and their plan brought forward by Move LA is really interesting. It's really ambitious because it is not just Los Angeles County. It's actually the entirety of the very sexily named South Coast Air Quality Management District. And that is a special purpose district. This one encompasses Orange and Riverside counties, as well as most of Los Angeles and part of San Bernardino County. And yes, great acronym, SCACMD. All right, so yes, so I believe this 2020 ballot initiative is the best chance we've had in a generation to rebuild the Pacific Electric Railway as it was at its greatest extent. And of course, this map I've constructed here is the product of several years of research, and I've traveled to most of these right-of-ways, and I've taken tons and tons of photos, and I've visited many of the old corridors, but a lot of the times they are too far gone to be conceivably used for future rail service, such as is the case in West Hollywood with some of the old Pacific Electric lines around there. That's partly why the Purple Line has to be a subway. Nothing against subways, they're great, but there would have been a cheaper option on the table in addition to a subway had there been a preservation of those original corridors. So anyways, what we're going to do today, this is going to be, strap in, this is going to be a bit longer than my usual videos because this is not, the question, can we bring back the Pacific Electric? The answer to that question is yes, but it's a very complicated yes, and today I'm going to, for those of you who care, I'm going to just go through exactly how I wound up on this particular map as my vision for how the Pacific Electric could realistically be revived as a combination of modern metro rail and for as far as Harbor and Beach Boulevard, and of course the Orange County streetcar as OCTA bus rapid transit, or as streetcar service ideally, which would be my preference of course as a rail fan. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at each one of these lines one by one, and I'm just going to walk you through exactly what led me to believe that these lines are specifically are the most politically feasible and also the most logistically practical um, lines to aim for if we're going to make a serious attempt to revive the Pacific Electric. And I will get into the Inland Empire and San Bernardino, of course, in future episodes. So don't think I've forgotten about you just because this particular map does not include those areas. But for now, we're going to look at reviving the southern lines of the Pacific Electric. Because when Measure M passed, I mean, this is the Measure M map, and it really is. I mean, I took the liberty of adding a few things onto this map that, this is by Steve Boland of calurbanist.com, and I love using this map for my videos, and he's been nice enough to let me use it. And I also kind of modified it to show some additional lines I think should be built, namely the Vermont one, which was my Vermont subway video or elevated line video, and of course I'm showing the arts district because I think that's a political inevitability. The chorus of voices calling for that is too strong for that to remain unfunded, so that will happen, I think. And of course, my most recent modification to Steve's map was I added just this stationless stretch of the Old West Santa Ana branch. Of course, this would have stations. I just haven't had taken the time to put them in yet. Yeah, that would connect to the essentially Harbor Boulevard in Orange County would be like the dividing line between the Metro service area and the OCTA service area. And I think that's just based on the resources available to the respective agencies. So anyways, all right, so how do we get from this to this? How do we rebuild the entire Pacific Electric? It's not a small task, but it can be done, and I'm going to show you how exactly we're going to do it. So let's begin. I began looking at reviving Pacific Electric because Lewis over on the Facebook group Fans of Metro Rail brought up Bria to LAX line, and I'm thinking, well, yeah, because the Pacific Electric used to have this old Whittier line right here, and believe it or not, the Whittier line mostly survives as a contemporary freight line. It's not very heavily used, and it could easily be purchased by Metro for the purpose of expanding rail service to these areas. So that Whittier line goes from Slauson Junction, which is the Slauson station on the Blue Line now, and that connects rather neatly with this old Santa Fe line, which is now the Harbor subdivision, which Metro actually bought from Warren Buffett's railroad, BNSF, not too long ago as part of the Crenshaw LAX line. But they're not actually using all of it for the Crenshaw LAX line. So I'll show you that right now. Okay. So here's the Crenshaw LAX line right here, and you'll see that so at Crenshaw Boulevard, the Metro Rail for this is what's funded already as part of Measure M, and the measure before it, and that this should actually be open in just a year or two, I think. So yeah, this is the Harbor subdivision now, and it's going to be part of the Crenshaw LAX line. But you see, at Crenshaw Boulevard, it takes this old Los Angeles Electric Railway route north, and that's where it meets with the Expo line. And so at Crenshaw, this part of the Harbor subdivision still exists. It's intact. It's not used, and Metro does own it. So what would be the most feasible, realistic possibility for bringing back rail service along this corridor, which would actually, it would be really great because it would connect a number of lines that are being built already together because Slauson is just a significant east-west corridor, and it would run along Slauson. So we're going to show that now. So here is that Bria LAX line, and so as you can see here, it would run a parallel with the Crenshaw LAX line up to Crenshaw, and then they would separate here, and it would run along the Harbor subdivision to Slauson Junction, where this industrial property here would have to be purchased or subdivided for Metro to build tracks through here. And then it would connect to, actually this track here is already being developed for rail as part of the West Santa Ana branch. So that's gonna, I believe most likely will probably parallel the blue line to Slauson, and at Slauson it will turn down here and run through Huntington Park until it gets to, I believe that's Salt Lake Avenue, Salt Lake Park right here in Huntington Park. Bell is on the other side of the tracks there. So anyways, yeah, this is going to be built as light rail already, this section right here. So only this section would have to be built in addition to things that are already funded. And yeah, and but then it would separate from the West Santa Ana branch. This would be great for transfers and such, because both lines would run parallel here, and it would run parallel with the blue line too. But it would separate and go through Maywood and Bell, and then this area does not have the transportation that it deserves right now. It simply does not. This is the gateway cities are very densely populated, and they simply do not have adequate public transportation to meet the need that exists there. So revival of the Whittier line would actually be probably the most beneficial to these working class communities at the fork of the Rio Hondo River right here. This would just be a very transformative, have a transformative effect on these gateway cities, I think. So that would be a politically fairly easy to do. To get this line built. There would be a lot of support for it locally, I believe. And the right-of-way exists until it is, I believe it has been obliterated past here. But up until this point, the right-of-way exists. Some of it's abandoned, some is not, but it's all there. So that's the Bria LAX line there. And then another line that would be very politically easy to do would be a line to Disney. Everyone wants to take rail to Disneyland. And Disneyland, I believe that the movie Roger Rabbit is actually based on this. I think the movie Who Framed Roger Rabbit and the plot, Judge Doom's plot, I think it's based on the fact that the 5 freeway was constructed through Disney right here. And hi Mom. And the reason I think that is because I think Walt Disney adored trains. It was like his whole thing. And if we go back to the Pacific Electric map, we'll see that Disneyland was built on what was originally the Anaheim Southern Pacific Station. Now the current, the Metrolink and Amtrak station in Anaheim that you know is actually Mira Lores. It's this one right here. The original Anaheim station was this is where modern day Disney is now, but this part of the old Southern Pacific route was just completely obliterated for the construction of the 5 freeway through Orange County. And I'll show you that on this map if my internet will behave. There we go. So we'll go to Disneyland. Get oriented. Okay, yeah, cool. So here's the Anaheim Resort, and so this is the old Southern Pacific line. What is the 5 freeway now? It was the Southern Pacific line that used to run between Santa Ana, where it met with the existing Santa Ana rail service. So the Southern Pacific line, instead of going straight up north here, that from Santa Ana used to join the Southern Pacific line that used to run where the 5 freeway is now. So I think Disneyland was meant to be a transit-oriented park, and I think the construction of 5 freeway is the reason why Disney is not a transit-oriented park, because it ate the rail line that went there. But I think it can be restored, and here's how. Because north of here, the old Southern Pacific line, the main line into Santa Ana that joined with the coast route, see, this is where it originally joined the 5 freeway, right here. And I think that might be why that you see freight trains running on the street in Anaheim, which is, I mean, it's cool, but it's kind of dangerous. But anyways, yeah, so the 5 freeway is supposed to be a rail line. So what I say we do is this Southern Pacific line, it's only been obliterated south of here. And there's a wide, I say just put a train down the middle of Disneyland Drive, just like they did with Colorado and Santa Monica for the Expo line, where they just, that part of the Expo line, a very small part, had been obliterated, and they just put the train in the street and reconfigured the street. It was totally fine. It's actually made the street a lot nicer to walk on, made it more pedestrian friendly, so that could be cool. So yeah, all right, so let's do our Disneyland line. So this Disneyland line, I give it a special color shade because it is a political winner. This line would be so easy to get built. Oh my goodness. All right, so this is the old Southern Pacific line. Downey grew up around the old Southern Pacific line. Karahi, if I'm probably saying that wrong. Southgate, all that grew up around that. And now, the Southern Pacific line ended at Alameda right here, the original Southern Pacific, but Metro has actually studied a Manchester Firestone rail line previously that would connect to the Blue Line, and the studies indicated that this is an entirely feasible and perhaps even necessary rail line. So, and all right, so the reason this is a real political winner is Mayor Butts in Inglewood really wants to get Metro Rail to this ridiculous Rams stadium he's building. Sorry if you love the Rams. I just think stadiums are silly. But it is going to be an event center. But the problem is that Mayor Butts' vision for rail going there, as far as I can tell, is just like a little stub of rail, just branching out just from the Crenshaw line enough to be here. And then it's like, well, why do you build a rail line if it's not going to be even used most of the time, because it's only going to be for events? You know, there's equity concerns that would bring up, like, well, what about the people that have to, you know, live in other areas and work there, blah blah blah. Yeah, but it's all valid concerns. So essentially, you just incorporate the old Southern Pacific line to Disney with this Firestone line that Metro has already studied, and that makes Mayor Butts, that makes Inglewood happy, that makes the Rams people happy, that makes this the Southern Pacific happy because they get to sell this old or the Union Pacific happy because they get to sell this land they inherited when the Southern Pacific went bankrupt in 1995, which they don't really want it. They're for-profit company and they're not making any profit off it right now. They'd love to just cash out. That's just how Union Pacific is. Okay, so I'm gonna speed through some of these other lines just because I want to get this video out and I want to get feedback on this, because I think this is a serious. I think we could seriously rebuild the Pacific Electric with the next Measure M. Okay, so now you might have noticed San Pedro really deserves rail service. And I think that we should look at rebuilding the old San Pedro Depot. So yeah. So anyway, yeah, I'm gonna try and speed through the rest of these lines real quick, just to give you the gist of them. Just to show that off for now. But all right, yeah. So these are the areas that Measure M didn't really show that much love to. You notice the South Bay just didn't get really what they wanted. I mean, having the dense rail system up here is the most important thing, so it had to be like that. But for the next Measure M in 2020, which incorporates the entire region, we really can't pass the South Bay by again. We have to remember to rebuild the rail that went through this area, and here's exactly where we do that. Yeah, so we got to do a line to San Pedro. San Pedro needs Metro Rail, absolutely. That's just a necessity. It's been something that's been in the long-range plans for ages. The Silver Line's not enough for San Pedro. San Pedro needs more. They need higher capacity, faster transit than is currently available, and so they need a rail line, a dedicated rail line. And I think they should actually have two. I think they should have this one, the just following the West Santa Ana branch through here, probably just Union Station up through here. We'll look at that later. Yeah, so following the Santa Ana branch route that's already going to be built right through here, and then it just branches off into Paramount, and then branches off from this line, which I think should be eventually, they should use the existing track past Long Beach Airport here, and then just have a line running down Cherry Street, and then just have a little lap around the park, Bixby Park out here. And I believe also that let's see here. So I said San Pedro should have two rail lines. I think the reason for that is I think they should have one that connects them to like Hollywood and the west side. They should have one that connects them to like downtown and the east side. And there are two historic Pacific Electric routes that work well for that. So this is one of them. This railroad is already owned by the port, I think. So this, or at least it's mostly owned by the port. So this should be easy, very easy for Metro to acquire and build a rail line on this. Give Phil Washington the money, he makes that happen. And then you want to also extend the red line all the way down to San Pedro. So this is the historic Pacific Electric route through the South Bay region, or it's one of them, rather. So if we look at the old Pacific Electric map here, if we look at this again, what we have here is, see the old, it's kind of grainy, the old Torrance shops were in this area, and so this is the old Pacific Electric route, and I say what we do is, since the Vermont Avenue subway extension is going to bring us all the way down here, I say just build it as an elevated line all the way down here to Gardenia, and then just switch from Vermont to Normandy Avenue right here, and follow the old Pacific Electric route, and tear down the, like, I don't know, 5 or so houses that have been built on the right of way over here. Sorry guys, but they should, I mean, obviously eminent domain is never something that should be taken lightly, but I mean, in the 80s, there were some houses built on the right of way in both Long Beach and Torrance, and I think they should really, I think the best approach would probably be to do just what LAX is doing with their parking facility thing right now, where they just kind of slowly over the course of many years just buy up the houses until the holdovers have finally found a situation. That way it's less violent than the kind of displacement that you saw with the construction of the 5 freeway or the 101 freeway, where it was just bulldoze entire neighborhoods. And that's kind of the point of of my map here, is this is a way to rebuild the Pacific Electric without disrupting neighborhoods, without destroying neighborhoods in the way that freeways did. This is mostly already here, so that means no bulldozers coming through people's neighborhoods, except the 2 specific neighborhoods that were built in the 1980s on the railroad right-of-way, which I think should be acquired and demolished. So this is the old Pacific Electric route here. This would be an elevated heavy rail line straight all the way through down Normandy, and now you don't even have to necessarily demolish those neighborhoods. You could tunnel under if you can find the money to do so, and that would be another option as well. But the right-of-way, the historic right-of-way of the Pacific Electric, actually resumes down here by Machado Lake, and as long as there were no grade crossings, and there are none right now because this is a big oil field, and we use eminent domain, acquire that oil field right here, and use that as a rail yard for light rail on this side and heavy rail on this side. And then bam, San Pedro has a real Metro Rail connection, and we gotta also rebuild the old San Pedro Depot as well. So we've got to do it on there's a beautiful old San Pedro Depot on 5th and Harbor in San Pedro, and we gotta rebuild it. Councilman Busciano or whoever is in charge when the Metro Rail comes back to San Pedro, we gotta rebuild that depot. And let's Let's see. Okay, yeah. So this is the logical extension of the Crenshaw LAX line. In the long range plan, it has it connecting to Long Beach. I say that's not enough. I say it's got to hit CSULB. It's got to keep going. It's got to go through Westminster. And I say that Harbor Boulevard is like Orange County's main street. So here's Harbor and Beach Boulevard are the two most important streets in OC, in Orange County. So that's like a the one on the right is Harbor, the one on the left is Beach. Those are the main bus corridors in Orange County, and right now OCTA is actually looking at turning those into rail or bus rapid transit, depending on what their public comment period yields. So go ahead and make a public comment to that. I'll put a link in the description to whatever Orange County website has the information about that. I'll look it up afterwards. But yeah, so here we have now Disneyland has rail access now, or at least bus rapid transit and metro rail access to Newport Beach and to LAX from this Disney LAX line. Or I think, did I say to the Disney LAX? Yeah, that's what this is. The Disney LAX line via Inglewood and Manchester Boulevard. All right, now we have rail coming back down to the central part of Long Beach, but what about East Long Beach? There's this great old railroad right-of-way that everybody that grew up in Long Beach always will tell you about, and it is just so cool. It's right here, and it mostly still exists except for a few houses that were built on it, which I think should be bought, at least, I mean, over a period of years, but they should be bought and demolished so we can once again have something that looks like this. That's what I'm calling like the seafoam line here, and that's as much of the old Newport line as I think can feasibly be revived at this time. The old Newport Beach Pacific Electric line used to run all the way down towards, Newport Beach, of course, to Balboa. And the problem is the part in Seal Beach is Seal Beach is a really small town, and that park is very large, but it's kind of like a central park, and I know there would be the idea of demolishing that park would not set. Nobody in Seal Beach would go for that. I think it would make a lot more sense for it to run on Pacific Coast Highway. For the revival of service down there, and there's just so many unanswered questions regarding Seal Beach that I think it's most practical for it to just, for the time being, to just end here. This is a job center right here, so you could walk to it from Seal Beach. It would be like a gateway between Orange County and Los Angeles County, and it would serve Long Beach, and you have like this Crenshaw LAX line to take you to LAX. And in the future, I mean, maybe OCTA could build a streetcar line to replace right down the middle of PCH, just to kind of replace the old. Maybe they could do it to LGB or something. They probably wouldn't because they want to promote John Wayne Airport, but they could have it at least to meet with Metro Rail here to the county line. Maybe they do a bus rapid transit at least. I could see OCTA having that in them. But specifically for this next ballot measure in 2020. Let's look at the rest of the remainder of these lines right now. So also already being rebuilt and already funded by previous ballot measures and Measure M is, the gold line is going to get us as far as, it's funded to here. It's funded as far as right here. This is where the east side extension of the gold line. This will eventually take you all the way to Santa Monica from Whittier. But that's what's funded now. So I say the rational extension of this is one of two options. The cheaper option would be to use what is currently the Whittier Greenway right here, and to connect to this Bria LAX line. That makes the most sense because that's all existing corridor. No demolition would be required. But there is the possibility, as some people brought up in comments on Facebook, there is the possibility that there would be significant community resistance to moving or disrupting the bike lane in any that are currently enjoyed by Whittier residents right here that have been built on the Pacific Electric Rail right away. And I say that's a totally valid concern. And if the community says no to relocating the bike lanes, maybe putting them on putting grade separated bike paths on an adjacent street instead and taking space back from cars. But if a compromise can't be found regarding the Whittier Greenway, then the Gold Line could just continue here to Whittier Boulevard. If you can see where my mouse is here, just follow 72, which is Whittier Boulevard, right to La Habra here, and then where I guess it would have a separate junction with the OCTA Harbor Boulevard service, which I believe to be inevitable. And all right, and this last thing I have is okay. So the other one, big one on here, is the Beach Cities line. Okay, and we're going to look at that. All right, let's see here. This pink line right here. That is the Beach Cities line. So. All right. The original route of the Pacific Electric was actually to Watts. It was the Santa Ana branch here originally went to Watts, but the construction of the 105 freeway through this area here just really it completely obliterated the old Pacific Electric right of way. And there was the community was very good at the time, and they this was right when the Blue Line was first being rebuilt, and the people in this community were like, hey, what are you doing? Why are you building why are you demolishing this railroad right away to build a freeway when we're actively rebuilding this rail system? And that resulted, there was legal action, and ultimately that's why the Green Line had to be built as part of the 105 freeway. It was part of a consent decree with from a court case that was filed against probably Caltrans of the state by these communities. Because the Pacific Electric right-of-way was being eaten by this horrible new freeway they wanted to build. So they were like, well, let's make the freeway a little less horrible and put a train in it. At this point, this portion has been obliterated because there's this very dense housing right up here, these ones, but the old Pacific Electric line kind of resumes right here, and this has not been obliterated. So you connect the Green Line to the new West Santa Ana branch, and then you have a continuous line, this pink thing here. This is existing track too that runs past SpaceX through Hawthorne right here. The old Hawthorne Mall is probably going to be redeveloped at some point. And then you have a junction at Douglas here, and this beach, and then this is the Veterans Parkway. And of course, you will have to figure out how to replace any acreage of green space that is eaten by the revival of this as rail right of way. But if you look on Apple Maps, as I will right now, computer's being a bit slow, so I'll check back on Apple Maps in a minute. Yeah, so this is existing, this was a rail line, and they turned it into, they preserved the rail line by turning it into Veterans Park. But it is, the rail line intersects with Veterans Park, and if you wanted to do Metro Rail to the beach cities, all you have to do is turn Veterans Park back into Metro Rail. And you just do that, you follow this line, and what you essentially have to do is find new land to turn into park space and do that, because it's not fair to take a park out of a community. But it is fair to trade parks if it's for the right reason. Especially, you could give them an even better park than the Veterans Park they have now. This is it right here. You see it's shown as green just because that's how they protected the right of way from being developed, which is very smart of them. But yeah, you see this here, and that would probably have to be demolished. But this is all being redeveloped anyway. This whole power plant complex is poof, that's going away. These cities are going to have a nice waterfront again. Redondo Beach is going to have a nice waterfront. So you get this down, you get the rail line down to Catalina and Torrance Boulevard, and then you have a different line to connect that to Disney. And that, I mean, in theory, would make sense also as maybe an OCTA line if they started being good at building rail. But they're just not there yet. So let's make that a Metro Rail line, and it's mostly in LA County anyway. And I think it's just more rational to have the major north-south corridors be OCTA. And I think, of course, you have the. I also wanted to show on this map that the Green Line would eventually be getting extended to Norwalk and Santa Fe Springs. I also drew the blue line on there. And boop, transfer stations, major transfer stations, and there you have it. This is how we rebuild the Pacific Electric Railway with a ballot initiative in 2020. Any questions? Thanks for tuning into Los Angeles. Please like and subscribe, and thanks so much to all my patrons on Patreon.